Welcome to Game Changer. I'm Maryam Zia. Tonight we'll be talking about the unfolding situation in Middle East, where there is a potential that Israel's action may ignite a regional war. Recently, Israel carried out a massive airstrike on Beirut, killing Hezbollah's leader Syed Hassan Nasrallah. And Israel's actions, when we look at Israel's action in the past 1 year, of course, it has killed thousands of innocent people in not only in Gaza but Lebanon as well, and millions has been displaced so far. UN has warned that Lebanon may turn into another Gaza. In today's program, we'll be talking about the unfolding situation in Gaza and what it means for the region. We'll also discuss about the basic question that will this killing of Hassan Nasrallah will lead to a game change, will be a game changer in the region, and what it means for Lebanon, for Gaza and for the wider Middle East as well, and its impacts and implications for the world at large. All these questions and more we will be discussing in today's program. And to talk more about this, we are joined in the studios by Mr. Jauhar Saleem, who is former Foreign Secretary and President IRS. Welcome to the program. We're also joined by Mr. Sheharyar, who is analyst. Welcome to the program. Mr. Jauhar, let me start with you. When we look at this situation, of course, this is a significant event when we look at the recent killing of Hezbollah's leader Syed Hassan Nasrallah. First of all, what's your take on this?
Yeah, this is a major event. Of course, this assassination, but it comes on the heels of some other assassinations. For instance, Ismail Hania.
Just 2 months back.
Exactly, and many other leaders as well. Mr. Akil, another Hezbollah leader, was killed recently. And then many second string and sort of third string leaders have been recently assassinated as well in these airstrikes and through those pages and walkie-talkie attacks, the technological attacks, the sci-fi type sort of attacks. So as the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said recently, this is an endeavor, in his words, to change the balance of power in that region. And what they call these Hezbollah and Hamas, the Iranian proxies, and the Houthis, they're also attacking the Houthis now. So they want to damage them to an extent whereby, in their interpretation, the Iranian influence in the region would be diminished. So that is the endeavor. But this is a dangerous game because, as we all know, what is happening in Gaza for the last a year now almost, on the 7th it will be a year since the inception of the Israeli military invasion there. Around 45,000 people have been killed. Now in Lebanon we see there have been like over 1,000 people killed already, 1 million people displaced. There are 2.4 million people who were displaced in Gaza. And the whole world is watching the massacre and the brutalities being unleashed by Israel there. The millions of people now, they are without proper housing, basic amenities of life, they're facing starvation and famine. And all this is happening, why? Because of the right-wing politics in Israel, because of the political survival of Netanyahu, for which he is willing to go to any extent. You see, the Americans have been endeavoring, they have been trying very hard to have some sort of to work out some sort of a
So we're talking about the peace solution as well, but let me take the same question to Sheharyar. What's your take on this, especially when we look at the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah? How significant is it for Hezbollah and for the wider axis of resistance in the region?
Maryam, it's definitely a very significant event and definitely a very devastating blow on the whole, I would say, infrastructure of Hezbollah. Another angle that we also need to discuss is the diplomatic humiliation that the US has also faced, because if you look at like all major publications in the West, Prime Minister Netanyahu in the UN General Assembly, when he basically went for the meetings over there, and his speech During that time, the US administration had basically said that the Netanyahu had agreed to a 21-day ceasefire in Lebanon. And it was a humiliation on the US, for the US counterparts, when they basically saw that Netanyahu reneged on that deal, and he basically ordered this assassination from Washington at that time. And then the US had to come out and basically say that they had no knowledge, no prior knowledge that this action would be taken by the Israeli side. So this also puts the US in a very precarious situation, in which all the Western allies, and as we witnessed when Prime Minister Netanyahu was giving his speech in the UN General Assembly, most of the countries are not present, and a lot of them also like walked out when he was delivering his speech.
This was a public display of boycott of his speech.
Exactly.
Because of
so
actions.
This kind of like shows that internationally Israel is very isolated because of its unilateral actions that it has been taking. And all the international arbiters or like stakeholders that have been pushing for a ceasefire now, including the US, they have been humiliated in front of the international community. And it's very difficult for them to basically justify how unilaterally Israel is taking all of these actions without taking the international community on board. And this has created a lot of pressure in the region as well. A lot of like Arab countries, GCC countries, and historic allies of Lebanon like Syria, Iran, they're also at a very sensitive situation right now on whether they would be escalating, going up on the escalation ladder, or trying to show some sort of strategic restraint. That would is yet
that
to be seen.
Remains a significant question. And Mr. Jauhar, first my question is, what are the immediate implications of this assassination for Lebanon, and also of course keeping in mind Hezbollah's role in Lebanon and the broader region in the recent past?
Well, first of all, Hezbollah had become a very important organization for Lebanon, primarily because of their contribution to expelling Israel from Lebanon. At one point Israel was occupying a part of Lebanon, and it was Hezbollah's resistance which eventually forced Israel to leave Lebanon. In
2006.
Exactly. And that greatly enhanced the influence of Hezbollah and a lot of goodwill to the organization there. The Israelis have been trying to take out the leadership, and in fact Hassan Nasrallah's predecessor was also assassinated by an Israeli airstrike. Exactly.
Abbas
Mousavi. So this is a tussle that has been ongoing for decades. But now what has happened is, in Israeli viewpoint, they have unleashed these actions which they believe have resulted in a mortal wounding of Hezbollah, or a mortal blow to Hezbollah. Because how it started, first there were the pagers, all the pagers blew up, the pagers that they were using. Why were they using pagers? Pagers is not a very modern technology. It's a pretty old technology compared to cell phones and everything. But exactly for this reason, they were using the obsolete technologies, because they did not want Israeli intelligence to give a chance to to infiltrate the organization. But the contrary happened. Somehow they were able to infiltrate. So that took out a lot of Hezbollah operatives. And then, of course, the walkie-talkie attacks, and now the Israeli airstrikes, which have resulted in killing of, besides Hassan Nasrallah, many other important leaders as well. So that is, for the time being, Hezbollah is in some sort of a disarray. And before that, what we've seen, Hamas, they have, after unfortunately killing those 45,000 people in Gaza, they have been able to damage Hamas's capability as well. And similarly, they are now trying to inflict damage on the Houthis as well. So from their perspective, what the Israelis have been able to achieve, they have been able to weaken what they call the Iranian proxies in the region. And you see, what Netanyahu is doing is, for Netanyahu, Hassan Nasrallah's assassination, or Ismail Haniyeh's assassination, or Aqil's assassinations, or Mohammad Daif's assassination, these are all trophies that he's showing to the public there, especially the right-wingers, like, look, what I have been able to accomplish.
But at the same time, Mr. Jauhar, what do you think? Has it triggered potential for a wider conflict and violence in the region? And what are your expectations? Because we know that Hezbollah has very sophisticated technology as compared to Hamas. So do you think that Hezbollah is likely to pursue revenge for these killings, or they are going to be more calculated in their actions in the coming days?
I would say the latter. I think the technological capability is there, primarily based on the projectiles that they have. They have thousands of rockets and missiles, and they did fire some of these recently on Israel. But I think that capacity, you see, the technological gap has definitely widened between Israel and Hezbollah over the last some years, it seems. And that has that has changed the power dynamics. That is one thing. I think the power dynamic between Israel and Iran has changed as well, primarily because of the technological advancement by Israel and the sophistication of the intelligence operatives. That is one thing. But having said that, Iran has shown a lot of restraint, although there were some major political assassinations there, and Ismail Hania was killed while he was in Iran, which was quite an affront for the country. But despite that, Iran has shown a lot of restraint. And I think...
But do you think that this killing might trigger Iran to go for more actions and a full-on confrontation between Iran and Israel at this point in time?
No, this is something which, which is the potential danger there, and everybody wants to avoid that. The Americans have been pursuing intense diplomacy since the inception of this military action by Israel, and they were successful, for instance, initially in 2 or 3 things. One, they were initially successful in ensuring that Hezbollah did not join Hamas in attacking Israel, when the Hamas-Israel confrontation was in full play. The second thing was they sent their naval assets in the region, so to prevent Iran and the Houthis from from a major conflagration. So that helped limit the conflict between Hamas and Israel. But again and again, there have been endeavors by Israel, unfortunately, because they have been taking, what I would call gambles, because a lot of actions they have taken could have resulted in widening this conflict. But it was only because of the Iranian restraint and restraint by some other groups, for instance, recently Hezbollah as well. Hezbollah hasn't really gone after Israel in terms of their full capacity yet. And I think they will probably not, because at this point in time, the organization is really reeling, they're trying to recover from this damage.
Right.
And also, a lot of back channel diplomacy, as we speak, is still in play. For instance, it's not just Hamas and Israel that are negotiating indirectly through the Americans and the Jordanians and the Qataris and the Egyptians, but also it's the Israelis and Hezbollah. Americans are conducting some diplomacy, a back channel of diplomatic shuttle diplomacy between these two organizations, between Hezbollah and Israel as well, in trying to effect some sort of a ceasefire. So that I think the Americans will probably try harder, because the widening of this conflict does not suit America. It does not suit the regional powers.
We will talk about US role and of course role of other international players, but at this point in time, with heavy military, of course, air strikes of Israel on Lebanon, Sheharyar, what's your take? Do you think that at this point in time, the ground invasion in Lebanon by Israel is kind of inevitable?
Maryam, first of all, I personally don't think Israel would want to involve itself in a ground invasion at this time, when it has an upper hand when it comes to destroying most of the infrastructure. So we don't even know exactly how many members of Hezbollah were killed or maimed when the whole incident with the pagers basically happened. So right now, when it comes to the communication infrastructure of Hezbollah, that has taken a major hit. And obviously, even when this whole pager and walkie-talkie incident happened, that is the time when the leader of Hezbollah went underground as well. So even most of their own organizational members did not really know where he was at that time. So right now, if you look at it from the Israeli point of view, they don't really need to open another front where, as Ambassador Jauhar has also mentioned, that the capabilities of Hezbollah are far greater as compared to Hamas. Their weapon technology, at least their rocket technology, is far superior as compared to what
but at
Israel
the
was
same
dealing
time,
with.
like you alluded to Israel's, of course, military campaign in Lebanon, do you think it has potential to backfire like it did in 2006?
Well, not right now. In 2006, they were pushed out from Lebanon by Hezbollah. This time around, they haven't like entered, boots on ground haven't like entered Lebanon as yet. Right now, if Netanyahu basically looks at it from a strategic point of view, he has a lot of wins, and this is the time when he can negotiate if he wants to and bring a ceasefire to Lebanon with Hezbollah. But at the same time, we need to keep this in mind that this has like no parity with whatever is going on in Gaza. At that time, when the initial negotiations of ceasefire were happening with Hezbollah, there was also a caveat that the same ceasefire would apply in Gaza as well. And that is what Netanyahu and his war cabinet was not agreeing to. Right now, I think they have the upper hand when it comes to the whole dealing with Hezbollah. They might go for a ceasefire in Lebanon because of more international pressure on that side, but this ceasefire would not apply to Gaza or troop withdrawal from the Delphi corridor.
Right. Let me take the same question to Dr. Zainab Ahmed, who has joined us online. And Dr. Zainab is assistant professor at Beacon House National University and also a research fellow. Welcome to the program. Dr. Zainab, how you look at this unfolding situation in Middle East, and how do you compare Israel's military campaign or military strategy in Lebanon as compared to that of in Gaza? Are there some similarities that you see there?
Assalamu alaikum. Am I audible?
Walaikum salam. Yes, you are audible. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much for having me. I think that right now Israel has a lot of advantage in Middle East. It has managed to control Hamas to a larger extent, and then it diverted its attention to Hezbollah, and it was able to level the field which Hezbollah did up 18 years ago in 2006. So, and it was always on their cards right at the start of this war in Gaza to kill Hassan Nasrallah, but it was American pressure. The international media is saying that the IDF had given this plan to kill Hassan Nasrallah to Netanyahu on 10th October 2023. But there was American pressure not to increase the war and not to take this to that extent. So I think whatever the U.S. is saying, the U.S. administration is saying publicly, tacitly, it has complete support. It has completely supported Israel, and broadly, they have succeeded to put this pressure on Iran also. And if you see, if you just listen to Iranian president's interview last night in New York, which he gave to Fareed Zakaria, he talked more about JCPO and going back to nuclear talks than talking about what will happen to them, although they have said that they would be taking the revenge of this, but they seem to be more inclined towards talks. So I think for now, Israel has managed to control the situation, and Israel has managed to control infiltration of Hezbollah and support of Hezbollah to Hamas from Lebanon and from Iran also. But the problem with the non-state actors is that they mushroom again, and they mushroom again and again, and they manage to get support from various sources with various changing circumstances. So that's something which will continue to haunt Israel. But for now,
and looking at the unfolding situation in the region, Dr. Zainab, how do you see, how sustainable is this Israel's aggression on two fronts in Lebanon as well as in Israel? How sustainable is this war going to be for Israel in particular, keeping in mind the complexity of course, the operations as well as fatigue of its troops as well?
As I just mentioned, that For now, it's sustainable. For now, they have managed to reduce the pressure of Iran in support of Iran also. But as I just mentioned, that it is not possible to keep on controlling the non-state actors. They keep on mushrooming, they keep on coming out, and I do not see that with this, without any agreement, they would continue to hold the situation as it is. And I don't think it's a militarily any problem for Israel. And I do not see that Iran would directly be involved in any conflict. So militarily controlling the situation on various fronts by Israel is not an issue. But controlling the non-state actors, the regrouping of Hamas, the regrouping of Hezbollah in the near future or within 3-4 years, and their support from IGRC from Iran and Houthis in Yemen, that's something which Israel won't be able to sustain for longer. For now, the political and diplomatic support tacitly, openly was from various fronts within the Middle East who did not want to see the dominance of Iran also in Middle East.
Right, right. So in all these, of course, unfolding situations, how do you see the role of United Nations, especially in the context of Israel's recent aggression on Lebanon?
I think United Nations has completely failed this test. And this was the time when United Nations could have played the role, but the dilemma of United Nations is that it cannot play any role effectively without the support of the US and West, which certainly were on the side of Israel this time too. And they also have their political, economic and diplomatic compulsions to side with Israel. So UN proved to be very fragile and very, very ineffective in this time too.
Right, but when we look at the international responses, how significant in your opinion are Russian and Chinese condemnation of this assassination of Hassan Nasrallah?
That's very significant. That's very significant, and they actually, rather, long before this, Russia and China had supported the China by signing that 25 years agreement of $400 billion and investing in Chinese infrastructure projects, and Russia openly supporting China. So, Iran. So they have taken this ground very seriously, and they have insinuated that at any time in near future they would be the party in Middle East, and their interests lie broadly in Middle East. And I think the U.S. Intention to let Israel broaden the war and expand into Lebanon and hit more and more to Iranian-backed proxies was also to snub China and U.S. backing Iran to some extent. So that message they have managed to deliver for now, but in the long run, it's not going to work.
Right, and how do you see that this, of course, stance of Russia and China on assassination of Hezbollah's leader? What kind of light it puts on U.S. Foreign policy in the Middle East? And how do you see U.S. standing in the Middle East at this point in time?
This time, the very distinct thing about U.S. supporting Israel is that U.S. public is not supporting Israel, and that's largely affecting Biden administration, and that's going to overshadow the upcoming American elections to a large extent. So by China and Russia, by giving this statement, in particular China, giving this statement has again given a message to the world that U.S. do not hold the place of a responsible superpower anymore in the world, and U.S. taking clear sides, and globally the public support is against U.S. on this issue. So I think China has given us very strong message on this.
Right, and Dr. Zainab, when we look at the situation in larger Middle East, of course, especially in the neighboring countries like Yemen, there is a civil war going on, and the recent negotiations. How do you see that this aggression by Israel, especially when we talk about assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, is going to be impacting those negotiations?
I think that these countries would now look more towards China for help. And as far as the negotiations are concerned, for now, Israel has been able to achieve upper hand in any prospective agreement and negotiations, and for any ceasefire agreement, if they reach, Israel has managed to create its stronger position. But non-state actors, how do they act in future? That's unpredictable, and that unpredictability remains. But I think broadly, various Middle Eastern countries would look towards China for help now.
Right, and how do you see the prospects of spillover of this violence into broader Middle East, especially in the neighboring, of course, areas or regions like Syria, like Jordan, which has, of course, with its demographic and geographic, of course, proximity to the region. How likely is the spillover of this violence in the region?
Oh, very much likely, and I see there has been a long-standing, long-term instability in the Middle East for so many years now, and so many different groups with different ideologies, with different objectives, agendas. They have managed to gather in different parts of Middle East, and I really see that they would be regrouping with their different agendas, but they would be more focused this time, and they would be doing anything in their capacity to do to inflict more damage to Israel. But there would be more intensity, more frequency of regrouping of various different groups in Middle East, and that would have far-reaching implications for the security of Middle East and also beyond Middle East.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Zainab Ahmed, for joining us in today's program. Of course, when we look at the potential of escalation of the violence in the region, in your opinion, how likely is it that this violence is going to be spilling over, keeping in mind the fragile structure of the neighboring countries?
Yeah, I think Zainab was on the right track, at least in the beginning. So the potential is there, definitely. And that is now what international diplomacy is all about. You see, on the one hand, there is that danger, and Israeli actions have been, some of them have been very reckless. And as we all say, that because international relations, a lot of times it's all about domestic priorities and policies. And in this particular case, it seems to be about Netanyahu's political survival and the right-wing politics in Israel. Which is actually shaping a lot of these events. Now, having said that, the Western countries, look, America supports Israel. There's a bipartisan support in America for Israel's security, Israel's survival, and generally, they support Israel's foreign policy as well. However, there is a caveat, and that is that many of the actions that they have taken in the last 1 year have not been approved by the Americans or the West, and in fact, because those actions have been giving bad name to the West in general, to the US in particular.
Right, but what options does US and other international stakeholders have at this point in time to prevent this violence from spilling over in the region?
Yeah, the first line of defense, or the first option, always is diplomacy, of course, and that diplomacy has been in play. Like I said already, there's intense, you see how many times Blinken, the Secretary of State himself, has visited the region. And he has visited not just Israel, he's visited Jordan, visited Egypt, and all the Qatar sometimes as well, Saudi, So that is, a lot of other US officials have been in sort of, Israeli intelligence agency and Hamas. They have been negotiating through America and through these countries. That is one. Then with Hezbollah, they've started another channel. So that is, and then the Americans with Saudis started yet another channel, where Biden came up with this proposal of a comprehensive peace plan, whereby exactly, whereby they said, okay, they will lay a path to the states, two-state solution, and sort of, in lieu of certain sort of concession by the Saudis. So the point is, on the one hand, we see that, Now, on the other track is what the United Nations track. United Nations, particularly the United Nations Security Council, was primarily built to prevent conflicts or to resolve conflicts.
And the irony of it is that Israel has attacked and widened its attack while UN session is going on.
Yeah, that's true. So unfortunately, like the League of Nations, the United Nations seems to have failed, especially in recent years, in preventing conflict, in resolving conflicts. The long-standing conflicts like Jammu and Kashmir dispute which have not been resolved, or the Palestinian question, and the conflicts which need to be prevented, like this conflict, which has resulted in the deaths of 45 to 50,000 people so far, and and endangered the security of not just the whole region but the world economy as well. That is, the United Nations Security Council, in an unprecedented manner, was able to pass certain resolutions this time, which would not have been possible before, because the Americans always vetoed. They even vetoed some of the resolutions this time as well, but they allowed certain resolutions to pass. But then the Israelis said those resolutions were not under Chapter 7, they were under Chapter 6, because under Chapter 7 the resolutions are binding. They could be enforced through certain means, which are including the military means as well.
There are some other, of course, United Nations Security Resolution like 1701 also demands cessation of hostilities between Lebanon and Israel.
Yeah,
but it was happening at the same time, and at the same time Prime Minister Netanyahu is giving statements like Israel is going towards escalation to de-escalate the situation.
Yeah, so exactly. These are like, very kind of oxymoronic type of statements and sort of, self-contradictory, which is not serving the purpose of, like restoring stability and peace in the region. But then there are the other avenues. We saw what happened in the ICJ ruling was there as well, very clear rulings, and then the proceedings in the ICC as well. So there are these multiple channels. But at the end of the day, what works is, okay, if all this doesn't work, what is the next level? The next level is where the Americans and the Western countries say, okay, we are now stopping shipments of armaments to Israel. So the defense supplies are being banned to Israel. That could be the next step. And after that, of course.
And how likely is that scenario going to be?
That scenario is, okay, first of all, some European countries have already done that. Americans are not likely to do that, because Americans, when this question was asked, is there a red line, like beyond which you will actually stop that? They said no, there's no red line. This has been American policy.
Ambassador Joseph, how US is going to be striking a balance between supporting Israel and, of course, preventing this conflict from spilling over into the wider region?
Exactly, and that is very clearly in the interest of the US to prevent the conflagration, further conflagration of this this whole conflict and widening of this conflict. And that is why the Americans are using all possible means, short of what I've said, and that, why can't they do that? Because of the fact that in the US, there is, first of all, bipartisan support for Israel, whether it's Democrats or the Republicans. In fact, on the Republican side, probably there's, it's even more pro-Israel in some ways. But the other thing is that they are in an election year, so nobody wants to annoy the the Jewish lobby in the US, which is a very strong lobby. Everybody understands its importance. None of the two parties want to do that. And that is why, even though there was a risk for Democrats to lose some of the Arab Americans' votes, some of the Muslim American votes, some of the votes of the youth and the women, and in some ways, Biden had to withdraw eventually. It was based on, primarily because of health reasons and and because of age. But some part of that was also his failure to prevent or have a ceasefire there, because if he had succeeded in that, he would have been in a different position. So the fact is that it already impacted the American politics, and it's going to continue impacting the American politics in future as well. But the fact, if I have to say a last word on that, that is that because the Americans have said themselves that there are no red lines, and that is what Israelis are taking advantage of. Because if there were some red lines, they would probably stop there then,
Right.
But because there are no red lines, so then, they have been crossing whatever other lines on the,
And that is leading, Sheharyar, to an increasing humanitarian crisis in the region. And when we look at the situation with over 1,000 people killed so far in Lebanon and millions displaced, how do you compare the humanitarian situation in Lebanon as compared to Gaza at this point in time?
So it's fast reaching, that situation, in which we can make like very direct comparisons to the humanitarian situations in both of these geographical regions. And a lot of like people from Lebanon are now moving into Syria to like seek asylum and like to basically save themselves from the relentless bombing that Israel is conducting in that region. Again, I think the onus would definitely lie on the US side, because most of the European allies of Israel, as Ambassador Saab mentioned, have stopped giving them more weapons, and Germany taking the lead in that, which was very surprising for me because of their unprecedented support in the European Union that they basically got as well. From the US side, I personally don't see a lot changing until or unless the elections like go through. And just like Netanyahu, I think the Democrats have also basically made a gamble. And in that gamble, they have basically internalized the fact that they would be losing out on the Muslim vote, the Arab vote, even the young progressive vote as well. These are the people who came out in unprecedented numbers against the Israeli aggression. And they've made a gamble in the sense that both sides, the Republicans and the Democrats, they basically could not risk losing the support of the Jewish or Israeli lobby in the US, and Israel obviously is like taking full advantage of that.
Right.
At the time when the whole popularity of the Democrats is going down, the popularity of Netanyahu in the right wing in Israel is increasing by the day. And he wants to capitalize on that, and he knows that unless or until the elections in the US take place, he has like a full go ahead on increasing this conflict as much as he can. And his best bet would be to pull Iran into a wider conflict, which would obviously give the US no other choice but to support Israel as they have been. Not overtly, but like maybe in terms of like providing them with like more ammunition, more military equipment. And even Kamala Harris, the leading candidate on the Democrat side, has very openly said that the US support for Israel in the Middle East is ironclad, and they will continue on providing them with support.
Right. And lastly, very briefly, Mr. Jauhar, tell us that can Lebanon, as some fear, become another Gaza if this conflict and violence continues?
So yeah, the potential is definitely there. Unfortunately, the reckless actions of Netanyahu know no bound. So it seems that he's willing to go to any extent to regain popularity in Israel. And for that, if he has to turn Lebanon into other Gaza, he'd probably not stop from doing that. But having said that, I think the Americans, the Europeans, who are the major supporters of Israel, they wouldn't want that at all. And that is why an intense diplomacy is in play, and probably in the coming years we could see a further intensification of that diplomacy to prevent or preclude that possibility, because that is not in the interest of the region, that is not in the interest of the Americans or the West, and particularly for America in an election year, and that is not in the interest of the world, particularly in terms of the fact that right now the global economy is in a very fragile state.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Jauhar Saleem, for joining us in today's program. Thank you very much, Mr. Sheharyar Khan, for joining us in today's program. Of course, when we look at this ongoing situation in Middle East stands at a crossroad, and with this escalation in violence, of course, there is a lot of potential that the region could spill over, that this violence could spill over into the whole region. And it is crucial for the world and for the international community to take action, especially that is grounded in international law, to promote peace in the region. That's all from Game Changer tonight. Take care. Allah Hafiz.